Oh. Welcome back to Queerly Thinking. I'm Reese Wheatley.
And I am your gaming-loving and relaxation-loving host, Sam Stone.
And we are welcoming Deforest White again today. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. This one's new. I don't know this one.
This is like one of the first times we've officially met.
That's pretty cool. Okay, so relaxation, not a huge fan of gaming. I can get behind this.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
Yeah, you all have some stuff in common amongst being queer and everything. But Deforest, Sam, Deforest,
Hi there.
Nice
Hello.
to meet you.
welcome. You were both guests on my last season. Wonderful guests. Great episodes, both of you. But how have you been since we last spoke, at least in the last episode?
I was gonna say we've spoken almost nonstop since then.
We have, that is true. But how have you been since the last filming?
You know, I've been pretty good. Life's going all right. Got a decent number of things to looking forward to in the future, and an absolutely stacked gaming lineup. This year's gonna do problems to my wallet.
Yeah, no, 2023, like, in May, my life is over. My life is going to be taken by video games. There's nothing else I'm going to be doing.
They could have been like Xenoblade Chronicles 3 DLC alone, and I would have been like, that's my next month.
The thing that's got me, the next Zelda game,
Oh,
hours
day
of my
one,
life are
of
going to
course.
be poured
Days,
into that.
days.
Days. Like, don't call me this week. I'm busy.
It's gonna be a problem because I know for a fact I'm gonna forget to eat.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, what other gay things are we
Oh
discussing?
gosh, I will have to remind both of you to eat and hydrate whenever you get these video games. We were in our dorm and they were watching the Nintendo announcement or
The direct,
whatever
yes,
what
of
was
I was
going
watching
on.
that live.
We covered that on my show here on the EP Media Network. Join us for Eastern Geeks Out bi-weekly with Jordan Lowry and me.
It is a good show. I will admit, I've watched it even though I'm not a gamer, but I still listen to you all talk. Mostly
I'm like
because you're pretty.
slowly trying to convert you into a gamer.
Yeah,
It can happen.
Yeah,
It can happen.
Mostly-
Celeste.
yes.
Celeste.
Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one.
that's a game.
Yeah.
What is that?
Basically, it's like this little platformer game where, like, it's an indie game, so, like, it's not made by, like, a huge company like
Okay.
Nintendo or, like, the people who made The Last of Us, for example.
Okay.
It's like your character just kind of goes through this journey of, like, self-worth and self-character, like,
She
as
climbs
they're-
a mountain.
Yeah, while progressing up a gigantic mountain. I
Okay.
haven't played it in a long time, but I
It's
remember it being a really sweet game.
gorgeous. It's like really fluid, like colorful pixel art. The composer of the game's music, Lena Raine, does fantastic work. And the game designer, her name's Maddie. Fantastic, like across the board. It's a good game. It's a good game.
I'll take your word for it. Maybe.
Or
I'll
you
start
could
it.
play it.
Or I could just play it and go
Could do
for it,
that.
honestly, which I could do. So I want to roll right into. So last episode we talked about The Last of Us, the video game, and the TV show, and I know that you are not well versed in that, but
Last episode we talked. Did we?
I was talking about. our
Oh,
episode.
right. Sorry.
Yeah, that's me.
Our episode in the last bit of our episode, our first episode of this season, we were talking about lack of trans representation in media specifically, and so I wanted to give it to Sam because Sam wanted to talk about lack of representation in video games specifically, and I am not as versed in that.
Well, I mean, that's actually a fair point. There could be more trans representation, especially in like main characters. A lot of
Right.
times when you do get trans reps, it's like tertiary side roles.
Yeah,
just
it's
off
like
the
kind of
thing.
unimportant side characters that don't add too much really to the overall
Yeah.
story. Or
If you're
experience.
interested in a game with like a really good trans like representation for the main
Yeah.
character, there is this small little indie game called Celeste. It's a game in which
Oh, the game that you just talked
yeah.
about. I'm just gonna write that down real quick.
No.
Thanks.
When the game first came out, I don't remember what the name of the company is now. When the game first came out, it was made by a company that was literally called Matt Makes Games. And since then, Maddie has realized that she's not Matt. So
Okay.
they changed the name of the company. And because the main character of the game, Madeline, was such a like personal character for her, she came to the realization at the same time that she realized that she was trans, so was the main character of this game. So they added on DLC to the game that, while never like directly confirming it, like sort of like added a little, like she had like a pride flag on her desk somewhere, and then people absolutely harassed the hell out of her online, like trying to figure out like whether or not the character was trans. And she actually came out after the fact and said like, yes, this character is trans. I never said anything about it specifically because that felt personal. Like, y'all don't need to know the details of this person's life, because that's like, being trans is inherently important, but like it should not be the first thing you know about someone. It is not a personality trait. It is an aspect of their being that like plays into their identity, which we talked a bit about on our last episode here.
Yes, we did. That was a really good conversation. But I'm curious to know, I don't know the name of the video game, but I would love to know what specific video game you wanted to touch on with the lack of representation.
Well, it's an interesting topic for me because for me personally, there is that is a good point, that there is like more, you tend to find more trans representation in indie games, which are made by, again, like I said earlier, independent studios and independent people. So
that's what you mean when you say indie games?
Yes, just people like...
independently made.
Yeah, it's
I thought you kind of meant like the indie music genre.
That is
and
the
I
same
was
thing.
Very confused.
You are using it correctly.
Okay, I am using it correctly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, indie music is just independently produced music.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And it's interesting though because me, I grew up not really playing a whole lot of indie games, so that's something I've been exposed to more recently. Like Stardew Valley took my life away, but
as it did so many people's. Rest in peace.
Hollow Knight as well. That was another good one, but
I no longer respect you as much.
In like in like mainline video games, that's something that's kind of a rarity. And we sort of touched on this last episode in video games like The Last of Us, where there is like LGBTQ representation, not necessarily trans, but like the characters that are there, it's very, you have to look in between the lines to sort of find it. The game never outwardly tells you, oh, this is a gay man who was in love with another man. Like it's something that's kind of implied. The show changed that, obviously, and but that's something that's it's a rarity. And for me, personal experiences, the games that, as a non-binary person, the games that I've grown really akin to, one in particular is The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild.
Fantastic
game. Favorite game of all time, but where it's not necessarily like Link is referred to as like he in the game, but like Link in the franchise, in the years that it has been a thing, that has been what he's known as, and it literally means a link from the player to the game. It's supposed to be, he's nothing really more than just a way to immerse you into the game as a whole. So you're not playing as like an in-depth character like Joel, again, from the last one.
If I recall correctly, when the initial design of Link came out on like the Nintendo Entertainment System, Shigeru Miyamoto has actually gone on record as saying the reason that Link is like depicted in such this like androgynous, almost elven state is because you were supposed to be able to identify with him regardless of what your gender was. And that's great.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
and I think that's cool. One of the...
Back in the 80s, too.
Yeah, honestly.
Whoa, okay.
Yeah, the original game.
I did not know that.
This franchise has been around for a long time now. I think just recently they had their 35th anniversary.
Yep.
Wow.
It is a very long-running franchise.
Would have been 2021, I believe.
Yes,
Because 2011 was the 25th anniversary with
when Skyward Sword came
Ocarina
out.
of Time. And,
but yeah, and so like, since I put an ungodly amount of hours into that game, it is...
Same. Gerudo outfit?
What was that?
Gerudo outfit?
See, I was just about to talk about
Never
that.
took it off.
You can dress Link in clothes that are like technically meant for like women, and like the game is like the game makes jokes about it, but like it is like, it was kind of nice for me to see like, oh, there's a character where I can put myself into this being. Like, I'm not watching a character that has established like an established life and story that I'm just watching. It's I can put my own, and to an extent, put my own being into this character, and like, you know, I can dress the way I want, and none of the characters are like, what are you doing? Like it's like it just adds like a lot of, it felt good to me.
I will say some of the characters will actually be like, what are you doing?
That's true, yeah.
There is a dichotomy between them. It's not like this world is universally accepting. And in fact, the circumstance in which you first like come into, at least the one that I consider like the most blatantly cross-dressing outfit, like femme presenting, is to get into a village of exclusively women, but like the implication is like, okay, yeah, it's a no guys allowed kind of thing, but there's a precedent set where there's another person you talk to who is, I think the Japanese term is like an okama, where they are not necessarily like passing, but they are femme presenting in terms of style, and is just freely able to journey into this place and accepted. And you, as the player, as Link, who for all intents and purposes presents and identifies as male, you walk in this outfit and you talk to like the leader of this place, and she's like, yeah, if you're gonna be here and you stay in the outfit that's like presenting as this, we'll accept you as female, and that's just cool with us.
Yeah. It's
Okay.
yeah, so it's not like in the sense of like, it's not that Nintendo released this game and is like, hey, here's our trans representation. It's very much of like,
You gotta make it yourself.
Yeah, the community that has been drawn to the game has very much made that in the game. It's so like,
Because Nintendo's actual trans representation is absolute garbage.
it is not good.
Their biggest trans rep is Birdo. Oh my god. Oh my god.
It's not.
It's not good.
Who is Birdo?
Birdo is the really weird, like, cone head shaped pink Yoshi thing that you can play as Mario Kart. Originally was a palette swap of a character from Doki Doki Panic when it got ported over here as Super Mario Bros. 2. And the player's manual for Mario 2 said in the description of this character that Birdo was a man who thinks he is a girl, which is bad.
That's tough.
Granted, also the 80s and also the Americanized version of a unrelated game, but like poor representation that just sort of got left by the wayside as Birdo's become like more prominent within the series.
Right.
But like you do get like some trans characters here and there, but there's almost always like a few like asterisks and like sidebars regarding like who they are, what they are, how they identify. One of the most intriguing cases that I'm aware of is Poison from the Street Fighter and Final Fight franchises, who is a trans woman, fully femme presenting, very sexualized, but not in a way where it's like over sexualizing, like fetishizing trans people. It's like you literally would never know. And she is like incredibly strong, incredibly like commanding presence, but bizarrely, her gender and her identity differ whether you're playing the Western release or the Japanese release. In the Americanized versions of Final Fight initially, there was, I don't know if it's been confirmed at this point, but the character started as an NPC in Final Fight where you would go around just beating people up. They're part of this gang called the Mad Gear Gang, and it was like a quarter-munching arcade machine. And in order to get around the rules set in place by the ESRB that you couldn't hit women in video games, they were like, well, actually, that's a guy.
Oh, no.
And while that origin is so wildly upsetting, over the years it's been like, okay, no, actually, we're going to put this character in more games because she's incredibly popular. And as she's like guest starring in Street Fighter, starting in Street Fighter 3, where she's the manager of Hugo, who's like a big professional wrestler, she starts to have more of a prominent role, and all of a sudden that like bit about her origins is left as like a thing of the past. In the Japanese versions, she's like fully just a lady. In the American versions, she's like trans woman, and over time the lines between those things have been like blurred until like now we're finally realizing, oh wait, those are the same thing.
Essentially.
Right. And it's It's not something that really gets addressed directly a whole lot, but it is something that's been the subject of like a lot of controversy and a lot of like case studies within the community. Personally, I absolutely love the character, but I definitely understand if some people think it's like positive representation, poor representation. It's right on the edge of being like empowering and or problematic. So it's just it's a weird state to be in.
Yeah, a tough position to be in.
Especially considering like the character's so old at this point. Like what do you do? You can't retcon an entire legacy behind you or else there's going to be more issues. So
is that your position? You said you like the character?
Oh, I absolutely adore Poison. She's fantastic.
Okay.
But I'm also a so
that's fair. That's fair, but along with like with that game, amongst all the other games that you like grew up playing and are now playing, what would you say the queer representation has done for you or not done for you?
Are you asking in terms of like how the games that I've played over time have transitioned from like having more or less queer representation, or are you asking how that's impacted me specifically?
Let's start with the second one, because that's what I was going for.
I think largely queer representation in games has only really begun to have a direct effect on me within the past decade or so. Because prior to that, it was always a case of you have to really, really look for it. It was never featured prominently.
Yeah.
And when it was, frequently it was in the context of like, this is an eroge, in which the focus of this eroge is like cute boys dressed as girls. And it's like, oh, look, they're cross-dressing. Cute. To which I say, that is correct. However, that's not really the representation we're looking for. That's just, again, me being. So there's not a great deal early on for me. Like, don't get me wrong, but I was able to establish, like, Link, cute. Midna, cute. I know what I am now. But I never had that, like, inherent, this is a queer-coded character, or this is an actually presenting as queer character, until much more recently. I have, like, a couple cases that are really meaningful for me, personally. But it's pretty rare that you end up with, like, straight out the gate, like, supposed to be good representation in games where it's not either, like, going too far and pandering for the sake of, like, this is now this character's personality, or it's an afterthought, at which point it ceases to be good representation.
Yeah. What's your take on that?
It's kind of interesting to me because I agree a lot with, like, you have to look for it. Like, it's really something that, like, game companies really are not super open about this. But it's interesting though, because I can recall a lot of things as a kid where I was like, this is really cool. I wish there was more of this. And then growing up, I'm like, oh, that makes sense. But like, for an example, in The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, there's a character that, there's a character that you're introduced to named Sheik.
Who made me feel
and especially for I have two sisters who are both gay. Did a lot for them as well.
Did he now?
Interesting. How do you spell this?
Sheik.
Yeah.
Subtle.
Yeah, that's right.
That's our boy. I will ask, Nintendo's, like, official accounts here have changed how they refer to as Sheik. Or, like, what they refer to Sheik's pronouns as.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because that's what I was gonna talk about. Is when I was growing up, I don't know if they've, like, changed it at all. Maybe they have, but when I was growing up, it was like, so basically for background. So during the game, you play as the character Link again, except it's like a different guy. But like,
spoilers for Ocarina of Time, Legend of Zelda, N64, 1999.
Yeah, if you haven't played this game in 1998, you're gonna have some problems.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I repent.
Oh, okay, so it's not as recent.
Yeah, no,
last
you've
episode,
had 2 decades to catch up.
we definitely had like
if you can't get the N64 version, well, I mean, yeah, you can because it's on Switch, but also, like, you can get the 3DS version came out in 2011.
There's a lot of ways to play the game by this point.
You can speedrun it in 5 minutes if you got Brawl on Wii.
Yeah, that's true. But anyway, this character would, like, as you'd be going along in your journey, like, going through, like, magic dungeons and, like, you know, beating monsters as Link, occasionally, every now and then, this character, Sheik, would pop up and would, like, be like, hey, Link, I'm here to help you. Here's this song I'll play you on my magical harp to warp you to places, like, so you can learn powers of teleportation. But, like, it
also,
was shown,
they're a ninja.
Yes, yeah, and it was shown,
I
like,
love
you can
that.
tell by the character model that there's, like, defined musculature and, like,
Yeah, I saw that
and it's, like,
in the
clearly
images I'm looking at.
the game, the people who were playing the game, and myself included, was like, oh, this is, like, a guy, like, because, you know, my, like, 8-year-old brain when I was playing it, I was like, oh, yeah, man.
Right.
But then, as the game goes on, it's revealed that Sheik's like, Link, I have something to tell you, and transforms, like, this bright
Smoke
light.
bomb.
And then it's Zelda, the princess of Hyrule. And you're like, whoa, the whole time she was Sheik. And
Yeah.
I was like, I remember in my mind, I was like, what? That is so cool. This is the coolest thing. And then... But, again, Nintendo in 1998, it's like, when Sheik is on screen, he's fully capable, is able to, like, throw down, like, a smoke bomb and disappears instantly, like, is able to clearly defend himself, and is, like, able to run from Ganon. Oh, yes.
No, he's not.
Is he not?
Nah, she gets his ass kicked.
Oh, you know what? I forgot about that one cutscene. We'll talk about He did lose that fight. But, like, baseline, he's shown to be at least more capable than the average person anyway. And is, like, able to hide from the overarching villain of the game, Ganondorf. But the moment that he is revealed to actually be Zelda, the Ganondorf's like, oh, I'm going to capture you. And the first thing she does is claps her hand in the back and is imprisoned, and it's up to Link now to save her. And as a kid, I remember that bothered me. I was like, wait, like, she was
Smoke
able
bomb
to...
teleport. Like,
Yeah,
play
like,
your,
she was
you
able
can
to do all of this
just
stuff
go.
before, but now suddenly that she's not dressed as a man, she's completely incapable. Like, I remember that really bothered me as a kid. Like, I was like,
Which is wild, because, like, immediately later on down the line, she does actually do a helpful thing, but it's presented as, like, I'm gonna stand here and channel
and,
magic
like-
and not actually do anything cool. It's, like, the lamest Kamehameha wave on the planet. Like, come on.
Yeah, so
At least
it's
give her a
like-
hype beam.
And then I don't know if, again, this is what I was going to say earlier. I don't know if Nintendo has changed this, but when I grew up, Nintendo very distinctly referred to Sheik as a he, but would still refer to Zelda as she, even though they're the same person.
Okay.
And so it was
That
always
was a
like,
huge non-binary moment for you, I
yeah,
would
and
imagine.
I was like, huh? Really shaped my brain.
Your downbeat can just change your gender. That's crazy.
And that's actually what I did.
Damn.
No, the actual real reason that I'm non-binary is I deleted my gender in my brain so I can make room for video game soundtracks in my head. So,
Oh,
Right.
sick.
yeah, so just so I
I've
can,
not
like,
tried
remember
that
most of
hack
them.
yet.
Yeah.
I gotta fit the Dragon Ball Fighters one in there.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And but that's just like something that I wanted to talk about. It's just like when we get these representations, it's always a mixed bag. It's never like, oh my God, I feel so seen. It's always like, to an extent, like, it's like you kind of have to reach, but like it is kind of there. And I think that's the frustrating thing. It's like you're almost so close to having it.
Yeah.
And then at the last minute, a studio will do something to screw it up.
Yeah, it's wild because like you mentioned, they started out like Sheik was he, him, Zelda's she, her, and even within like Smash Ultimate's lifespan, that changed.
Yeah.
Like Sheik is now she, her, in
Yeah.
addition to Zelda being she,
Yeah,
her.
so like they've kind of gone back and altered that, which
It's like, I get it, like it's cross-dressing, but also we had this super dope ninja dude, and that was like the gayest character in Zelda. That's not true. One of the gayest characters in Zelda. Girahim's bad representation.
yeah, that he was interesting.
Oh boy. I don't know, maybe he did something for Hunter x Hunter fans. But there's like a great deal of characters in like a lot of series where they're so close to doing something great. And it's honestly like baffling because I can see it happening more often. Like Xenoblade Chronicles 3, which just came out this past year, has like not just a non-binary character, like, oh yeah, they refer to them as like it's whatever, they're beyond gender. Like, no, nobody ever really acknowledges that they're non-binary. It's just like, yeah, they show up, they use they them pronouns, and everyone just accepts it, and they're like, okay, and it's never spoken about, and I love it. It's so nice because you can just have that be a thing, and it doesn't need to be like some integral facet of the character. It's they show up, they're here, and we clock it as, oh, that's cool. They put a non-binary character in the game, and they don't walk around going like every 3 minutes, did you know that I am non-binary? And roll out their flag. Like, okay, yes, you can do that. Great, cool, pride. But like, in order to have proper representation, there needs to be an element of that, and also an element of I am more than this.
Yeah.
Because we get stereotyped a great deal for being like, this is all that I am. Mm-hmm. And I feel like Xenoblade in particular made like great strides towards that no longer being the case because it just wasn't that important. Like, it's great that it's there, but it doesn't affect the story at all. They're a really important character that you cannot miss, which is important because a lot of times you'll have characters that are like one-off, but it'll be like, you know, a really cool like trans character, but they're a side character. And you gotta kind of go out of your way to get them because we don't want the Christians getting angry at us. And like, there's a good deal of like disparity between what is acceptable and there for the purpose of like good representation and what is there for the purpose of like ticking a box.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And that is a very difficult line, but an important line to walk.
Right.
That is true.
Well, and I also kind of wanted to talk about this. Reese, you would be much more knowledgeable, at least in this aspect, than me. In representation of identities in like TV shows and movies, how is like that come across in comparison to what we've been talking about with games? Because I'm not too knowledgeable on TV shows.
It's tough. I mean, I think we have a huge lack of representation in pop culture in general right now. I haven't really seen very much, if you want me to be honest. I'm not sure if it's the state of the society that we're currently in and kind of the rough patch that we seem to be hitting. And our community also seems to be hitting a rough patch, considering we are now like, we've been post-Trump for a few years, and we're now like about to face an election year next year, and so now there's more LGBTQ plus representatives that are coming to face to the media, like George Santos, and honestly, a complete embarrassment to the community. I'm ashamed to like have him a part of the community because I think that his blatant lies and dishonesty should have him barred from being a part of Congress. I don't feel that he should be in the media, but he is very heavily in the media right now. And so that is therefore translating into a weird culture of people not really wanting to acknowledge his queerness. And so I think it makes it like a really rough line between, okay, like, I love that he's in Congress and I love that he's so openly in the community and bringing out like queerness, but on the other side of things, you have like a rough patch where it's like, but he's not really good representation.
I believe I misunderstood the question. You said media, and I thought TV shows.
Yeah, I'm getting there, but
okay.
I was also touching on politics because I also kind of assumed that you meant just in general, and that is he has been in media recently, mostly like in a journalistic way, like he's been in news articles and stuff, but also in media in the way you were thinking. I do think that there's been a huge lack of representation, only exclusively on shows like the L Word, like I talked about, or The Last of Us, which is a huge show right now that's coming back, and the L Word, there was an original that was in the early 2000s, And now there's a new one called the L Word Generation Q, just to clarify, that has now come back. So it's like a new
Never
spinoff.
heard of this.
It is a really good show. And then you have shows that are
I'm
really
assuming
old.
the word is either love or lesbians.
It's really implied to be a lot of L words, like love, lesbian,
Gotcha.
lust.
Scott Pilgrim has taught me that these two things are interchangeable.
And then you have shows like, I don't know if you've ever heard of it, Queer as Folk, that are now getting rebooted by, I believe it's HBO or Showtime, which is exclusively about gay men, which I'm sure they will somehow throw in some more trans characters, but we didn't really face trans characters in like the 90s show Queer as Folk. But in current media, I think, and it's interesting to get a video games like perspective of it, because what I was going to ask you is, I was thinking to myself, I can hear people now saying, why do you need representation so much in media, and specifically for you guys in video games? And I'd love to know what you would say to those people that ask, why do you need representation? Do you need to see that reflection of yourself in games? Or does it really have to do with you just want to see someone that is a part of your community?
I'm going to go out on a limb and say neither. I very firmly believe that a game and its content should be up to the artistic direction of the person creating it. And it simply appeals to me more when I have representation of either someone who I can identify with or someone who represents something that I value. In particular, the game Catherine and its remake, Catherine Full Body, have multiple characters who in the case of one of them, I value extremely highly because of like her journey as a trans woman, being seen as the game shows her in a light where there are characters who knew her before she transitioned, and there are characters who met her after she transitioned, and you can see how differently the people who are meeting her now and the people who met her before like treat her and interact with her. It's not that big of a spoiler for me to say. Her name's Erica, and she is a waitress at the bar that you attend. And most playthroughs, you'll never find out that she's trans. There will be like things where if you already know, then you can clock interactions like, oh, okay, that makes sense now because I already know that about her. But like the game takes place, all the main characters are like in their late 20s, early 30s, and they're just like hanging out at a bar. And these are people who went to high school with her when she was Eric. And you see like the people who met her after the fact are like hitting on her more, and then the guys who knew her previously are like, don't, come on, man, you don't want to do that. Like, and she takes it all in stride, but like very clearly, like she's being mistreated.
Yeah.
And she's optimistic through the whole thing. But in particular, there's like an ending in which the main character is offered what is essentially like the morality system of the game values, instead of good and evil, it's freedom or like structure. And it's like on the structure side of things is the like you stay with your current girlfriend, you get married, you go down this life of like you know what to expect, and it's good. But down the freedom side of things is like there will be chaos, but you are untied to anything. You're free to do what you want. And there's one ending in particular where your character is given the ability to like essentially rewrite his life to become this like weird romanticized version of what he wanted it to be. And all of a sudden, Erica never transitions in this one. Eric shows up later down the line and is clearly uncomfortable, but like doesn't explain why. And it's it's seen as a good ending for your character, but not for hers. And I think that's wildly interesting because it shows like the decisions and like different people make and how they're going to affect the other people in your lives. And that just leads me to think about all the people who, like, in generations prior to us, could have been more comfortable with their identities and grew up with like this internalized like homophobia or transphobia or whatever it is, and simply never were given the opportunity or the education or like the support that they would have needed to be truly comfortable with themselves, and suffered a worse life for it. And Catherine does such a good job of showing that. But I've also seen people who absolutely hate the trans representation in Catherine because they see it as harmful, that she stays male presenting in an ending that is presented as good for your character, like as a desirable thing.
Yeah.
And I can 100% see both sides of that, but you also got to remember the game isn't about her. She's just there. Her life is important to her, and it's sort of important to the people around her.
Right.
And I think a lot of people sort of miss that because that's how we live our lives inherently, and we just don't really think about it a lot. We almost always count ourselves before others. And when you do that, you lose the perspective of a lot of these people that are coming from backgrounds that are different from yours, which you talked to me about last episode, about like your attitude towards, or I suppose I should say our attitudes towards people from different background. Like, how do we be more inclusive, and or should we?
Yeah.
And there's absolutely the problem of like, how do we do it without pissing people off? And the answer in the long and short of it is like, you won't. There will always be upset people, and it is up to you, and it is up to the artistic direction of the person driving this game, this show, this media forward. It's up to them. It's not your job to change it. But when you do get representation that's done well like that, it's so nice to see.
I think it's also interesting, going off of what you were saying of how, like, just like in media in general, like people are being exposed to all sorts of different, like, you know, like kind of like hate speech and like, you know, things like where people just are actively not supporting of like any sort of LGBTQ like relation. And it's kind of interesting because I think games and TV shows, not necessarily just games exclusively, but like especially nowadays with like how everybody basically has access to the internet and so many like streaming services now.
Right.
It, like, for an example, when I was growing up, you know, there was I saw a lot of like sexism where I was. Like, there was a lot of like, girls do this, boys do that. But I would play this one game as a kid that I was like, well, I don't know, called Metroid, where basically you play as this, I don't know if I can say this on the podcast, but badass, like space bounty hunter who like is a woman, and she's like wearing this gigantic suit where like, you know, she basically can fight any sort of alien and come out on top, like, and like just like win.
Good for her.
Yeah. And I grew up thinking this is one of the coolest people I have ever seen. Like, I would give up my leg to be her. Like, and so like, but the fact that she was a woman never really bothered me. Yeah. And I think that kind of can be important, especially for younger kids who just like, if they're introduced to these sort of concepts of like, everything's not so black and white. Like, there's boys and there's girls and they do this and they do that. We all know it is so much more and so much more complicated than that. And I just think with like video games, especially because they're so popular with, you know, younger people, especially, yes. If games were introducing these sort of ideas that like trans people are people and like, you know, all these sort of ideas, I think that could potentially be beneficial to future generations with just like being introduced to these ideas as not as this is bad, like, you know, sort of thing.
Yeah. I feel like it just boils down to visibility.
Right.
We just want to see the representation. We want to see it in front of our faces on things that we always see in media. And becoming a video game person myself, I appreciate learning more about video games because I do want to see that in video games and not just like Mario Kart, you know.
Well, if you're looking for games with more representation, that like are very like the more badass and capable side of things, two games that I would recommend looking into are Guilty Gear Strive as well as the Guilty Gear franchise as a whole. Multiple non-binary characters, canonically trans characters. Bridget recently came out of the closet. Good for her. It's fantastic. That's a 20-year-old character at this point who finally realized, like, oh, I'm a girl, like, this past year, which is great. And then Grand Blue Fantasy Versus is another one. It's based on a gacha game, big in Japan, and has, like, playable trans character, like trans woman who's male presenting, and nobody's bothered by it, which is so
I love that.
Good. Yeah.
I love that.
As well as trans girl who, again, nobody's bothered by it, and it's great to see. Like multiple like queer coded characters is solid. Highly recommend.
Noted. Thank you for those recommendations.
Absolutely.
But we're going to move right on into the part of the show where Sam does their little segment of a piece of media that they find that is really wholesome. It is a segment called Found Family.
Right, yeah. So on this episode, and by the way, I'm going to need exactly $85,000 from the editing team and from the producers to put like special fonts and like,
our
music.
producer's face right now is priceless.
Exactly. I need
we
to zoom up on
calculated
my
it.
face.
It's exactly 85,000.
Yeah.
Now some of that money is going to be used to censor me saying I was a earlier, so
yeah, and then
look at him write that note down.
Yep.
Yeah, and I'll need
a
a fun zoom up on my face going found family. But this week on Found Family, this comes from TikTok user. Oh boy, I'm gonna butcher this pronunciation. I'm just gonna.
They're just
spell
letters, aren't they?
Yeah, at ew.notace4. This TikTok shows a lesbian couple that is basically it starts off the video by showing a heterosexual couple. And it's like and there's text under it that's saying this is your normal, and then the pictures transition and it goes but this is my normal, and it shows her and her girlfriend enjoying time together, like lying on a bed together and reading a book, or like like watching the sunset and like going on fun trips, and like also I wish I could go to some of these places in the pictures. They look so cool.
They are very cool pictures.
Yeah, I just thought that this was a good thing to kind of show that there's like, heterosexuality is not just like the norm. Like you're not born straight and then
there
you kind of decide. A default setting. Yeah, there's not a default setting. Like
it really shouldn't be.
And so I just thought that this was kind of like a good and nice representation that this is normal. This is not something that's like you decide to just kind of do later in life. Like this is the way people can be, and this is just the way they are, and it's good to just see living their happy lives. And again, that comes from TikTok user ew.notace4. I do not know how to pronounce that.
It sounds like you, not ace4.
That's what it did sound.
Yeah, but
that'd be
I
weird,
wasn't sure
right?
if I should say that right.
Yeah. But when I saw it, my first thought was immediately like, oh, when I was in a queer relationship, I felt that all the time. It was always like, well, straight people are allowed to hold hands and not get stares all the time. But then, when you walk in the store and you're in a queer relationship, it's like all eyes are on you. Or at least it feels that way. It might just be like anxiety coming out. But I do think like the hetero norms of the world like play into the way that this person kind of probably meant that TikTok as this is your normal compared to this is my normal, but you probably won't see it.
Right.
So.
And you're 100% right. Like you do get like more attention as like queer relationships than what people see as the normal straight relationships. Although that could also simply be explained by the fact that you were there and people generally want to look at you because of how cool and attractive and neat you are. Could be. Just throwing that
You're
out
gonna
there.
make me
It's a
blush and get redder
possibility.
than I already am, and that is not good.
Ah, well.
But thank you.
Look
You
at this
are-
cool audio-visual format we have.
You are so sweet.
We're gonna need another $85,000 for
Yeah,
editing.
we're just gonna need a bunch of money, Ryan. Honestly, just
I get paid $0.
Ryan says he gets paid $5 million a minute.
that is a long time. He has a lot of money for this episode, then.
It's crazy.
But thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Absolutely.
I greatly appreciate having you on. I think your input about the video games for sure. I will have to come back on at the end of the season and have you back on for a third time just so we can talk about how I've enjoyed the video games and how the representation has been taken.
Cool. By the time you next see Reese, they will be a professional fighting game player. This will happen. I will make this happen.
Lordy be. Okay. Well, this has been the second episode of Queerly Thinking. I am Reese Wheatley.
I am Sam Stone.
Have a wonderful rest of your day.